About 3 years ago, I was under a lot of stress from dealing with people. I just wanted to be completely alone, somewhere I wouldn't have to see or talk to anyone. So I decided to go camping in a place where no one else would be around. After searching for a while, I finally found what seemed like the perfect spot. When the day came, I drove out and arrived deep in the forest. As soon as I got there, I started setting up my tent. Not long after, I heard a rustling sound behind me. Startled, I turned around, but there was no one there. After a moment of complete silence, I suddenly heard someone laughing from behind a tree. My heart dropped.
"Who's there?"
I yelled. Then I heard a quiet male voice reply. "I'm not telling you." I assumed it was just some weird guy messing with me, so I tried to stay polite.
"I'm sorry, but I came out here to be alone today. If you're gonna mess around, please do it somewhere else."
He didn't respond. He just stayed silent. I was annoyed by his strange behavior, but I figured he'd leave eventually, so I focused on finishing my tent. After I was done, I looked around to see if he was still there, but I couldn't tell. There were no sounds at all. So I sat down, watched some YouTube videos, and ate a simple canned meal. When night fell, I finally went into my tent and laid down to sleep. That's when I heard a voice. "Going to sleep now?" It was the same voice from earlier. Panicking, I jumped out of the tent and looked toward where the sound came from. It was the same tree the man had been hiding behind earlier. I could still hear him laughing.
"Who are you? Have you been here this whole time?"
I shouted. "I'm really good at hiding," he said quietly. At that point, I was convinced something was seriously wrong with this guy, and I lost my patience.
"Hey, stop messing around and come out here!"
I yelled. Suddenly, he sprinted to another tree and hid behind it. Then, everything went silent again. I was angry, but I had no idea what to do. I didn't want to get closer, and I had no idea what he might do. I was debating whether I should pack up and leave when he spoke again. "That tent is going to be your coffin." That was it. I decided I needed to get as far away from this lunatic as possible and started tearing down my tent. That's when he shouted, "Where do you think you're going? Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting to roast you?" I started rushing even faster. Suddenly, he screamed and burst out from behind the tree, charging straight at me. I ran to my car, locked the doors, and drove off immediately. He chased after me and slammed his hands against my car windows. I might have been mistaken, but his hands looked enormous, at least twice the size of a normal person's. I barely remember the drive. I just got as far away as I could, called the police, and went straight home. I don't know what happened after that. All I know is that I wasn't hurt, and I'm grateful for that. But even now, whenever I think back to that night, my breathing starts to speed up.
Hello, my name is Jacob, and I'm from County Wexford, Ireland. This happened when I was 9 years old. My father and I visited Loftus Hall, which is widely known as one of the most haunted mansions in Ireland. I'd always been fascinated by haunted houses, so I was genuinely excited to finally see it in person. Loftus Hall is located near the Hookhead Lighthouse in County Wexford. When we arrived by car and my father saw the house up close, he looked visibly shocked. The mansion was originally built around the year 1350 by the Redmond family. In 1666, it later came into the possession of the Tottenham family. Sometime in the mid-18th century, the Tottenham family experienced a horrific event in that house. After that, the building was used for various purposes over the years, including as a convent and a hospital. Eventually, in 2011, it was purchased by the Quigley family and opened to the public as a tourist attraction. While we were on the tour, I overheard other visitors talking about the house, and that's when I learned the legend that has been passed down through generations. This is the story they told. It was a stormy night. The Tottenham family, who were living in the mansion at the time, were sitting down to dinner when they suddenly heard a knock at the door. When the head of the household opened it, he found a handsome young man dressed entirely in black standing outside. The family later referred to him as the Dark Stranger. They were a religious family, and they believed it would be unchristian to turn a stranger away, so they let him in and allowed him to stay. One of the daughters of the family, Anne Tottenham, who was believed to have been around 16 years old, became infatuated with him. One evening after dinner, the family and the Dark Stranger were playing cards together. At some point, one of the cards fell onto the floor. When Anne bent down to pick it up, she noticed something horrifying beneath the table. The Dark Stranger's feet were shaped like a goat's hooves. Anne immediately jumped up and shouted, "Your feet are split!" At that moment, the Dark Stranger burst into flames and shot up into the air and burst through the ceiling before vanishing into the night sky. A massive hole was left behind in the ceiling. According to legend, no matter how many times the family tried to repair it, the ceiling kept cracking. After that night, Anne was never the same. Her behavior changed completely. She stopped speaking and lived in a constant state of fear. Eventually, her family locked her inside her room. She refused to eat and spent most of her time staring out the window, as if she were waiting for the Dark Stranger to return. Anne died in 1775. When her family discovered her body, it was said to be rigid, with her arms and legs twisted into unnatural positions. No matter how hard they tried, they were unable to straighten her body. In the end, she was buried in that twisted posture. People later claimed that because Anne had seen the devil himself, her soul was twisted. Over the years, those who entered her room reported hearing whispers and the sound of footsteps when no one else was there. At one point during the tour, a visitor asked me to open the door to the room where Anne had been kept. The moment I opened it, I briefly saw the figure of a woman dressed in black standing right in front of me. I believe it was Anne's ghost. I also felt an intense, unnatural cold. But as more people entered the room, the cold suddenly disappeared. Years have passed since then. When I think back on that house, part of me still wants to visit it again someday. But I've since learned that the property has changed ownership, and it is no longer open to the public.
Around 2015, I was living in Tempe and working at a credit card company's call center. I worked the night shift, and I practically lived on coffee. I drank so much of it that my clothes always smelled like coffee. The job itself wasn't that hard. What really made it difficult was one of my coworkers, Amber. We were constantly on calls with no time for small talk. Tall cubicle walls separated each desk, so we couldn't even see each other's faces. Because of that, even though we worked together for over 6 months, we'd barely ever spoken. Then one day, I ran into her in the break room. She suddenly said to me, "I've explained this 3 times already. How do you still not understand?" I honestly thought I misheard her. "Excuse me?" She looked at me and added, "That's what I wanted to say to the customer I was just on the phone with. He was unbelievably frustrating." For a moment, I just stood there, confused. Then I started to feel irritated. I asked her why she was saying that to me. She didn't respond. She simply walked back to her desk, sat down, and started taking calls again as if nothing had happened. I decided I'd confront her after work. When my shift ended and I walked into the parking lot, I saw her standing there, waiting for me. I was surprised, but I kept a straight face and asked her why she had talked to me like that earlier. She smiled and said, "Oh, so it bothered you?" I didn't really have a choice. I had nowhere else to vent my anger. The customer wasn't in front of me, and breaking the monitor would have cost too much. As she spoke so calmly, my hands started to shake. This wasn't the usual caffeine jitters. It was fear and anger. I warned her very clearly never to speak to me like that again. Her expression changed instantly. Her eyes went cold. And then she said, I think I know what I should break next." The moment I saw her eyes, I understood. This was the kind of person you should never get close to. I ignored her and got into my car. She suddenly slipped off one of her heels and raised it, as if she were about to smash my window. I panicked, started the engine, and drove straight home. That night, I texted my team leader and told him everything. The next day, Amber was officially warned. After that, I avoided even making eye contact with her. Then one day, I heard she had quit. I felt relieved. But not long after that, when I finished work and walked to the parking lot, she was standing right next to my car. She positioned herself in front of the driver's door as if to block me from getting in. She said she wanted to apologize and asked if I'd get something to eat with her. Something felt very wrong, but against my better judgment, I agreed. We went to a nearby diner. As we ate, I realized she hadn't come to apologize at all. Her apology was brief and empty. The entire time she stared at me as if she might stab me with her fork at any moment. A forced smile stayed frozen on her face. When I finally got home, an overwhelming, unexplainable exhaustion washed over me. The next day, she was waiting for me in the parking lot again. Once again, she asked me to grab a bite with her. I told myself this would be the last time. While we were eating, she suddenly said, "There's something I've always wondered." "What is it?" I asked. "How do people live like that?" she said. "What do you mean?" "How does everyone manage to keep living while holding back the urge to kill someone?" she whispered. "They're so good at suppressing it, but I'm not anymore." She leaned closer and continued, "I'm trying to decide whether or not I should stab you with a knife right now." That was when I finally understood what she was. I looked straight into her eyes and said slowly, "You're not like most people, and honestly, I pity you. You're going to spend the rest of your life suppressing a dream that can never come true." Then I left. I went straight home. Thankfully, she never came looking for me again. But even now, I still wonder, what kind of person was she? And what exactly was she planning to do to me?
This is a real story from a friend of mine. It didn't happen to me, and I wasn't present when it occurred. For privacy reasons, I'll refer to my friend as Yancey. Yancey had an uncle who was very friendly and talkative. One night, Yancey, her uncle, and her aunt were hanging out together. It was around 12:30 a.m., and they were standing beside the road, just talking. Suddenly, without any warning, her uncle ran across the road in a frightened, panicked rush. He reached the other side, bent down, and picked up something, or at least that's what it looked like. His arms were open, positioned as if he were holding a person, but there was nothing there. Yancey and her aunt were completely confused. Everything happened so fast that they didn't even have time to process what was going on. Then her uncle sprinted back toward them, still holding his arms as if someone was in them. That's when a car hit him. He was rushed to the hospital and fell into a coma that lasted 3 to 4 years. When he finally woke up, he told his family what he believed had happened that night. He said he saw an old woman who used to sell jujubes sitting across the road. He recognized her immediately and ran to save her because he thought she was about to be hit by a car. Years earlier, there had been an elderly vendor woman who regularly came to their house to sell jujubes. She was especially close to Yancey's uncle and treated him like her own son. He had always been kind to her. Not long after those visits stopped, the woman passed away after being hit by a vehicle. That night, Yancey's uncle believed he saw her sitting across the road. Unfortunately, after the accident, he was never the same again. He lost his mental stability, and his personality changed completely. Maybe it was the ghost of that woman. Maybe she wanted to take him with her, but why would she return after so many years? I guess we'll never know. Hi, I'm a huge fan of your YouTube videos, and I wanted to tell you a story my friend experienced, so I hope you get the chance to see this. Anyway, this happened when he was 13. He was working with his uncle at a water park in El Salvador for some extra money. He had been working there for a few weeks already. One day, while they were cleaning, his uncle realized that he had forgotten his tools in the bathroom and was about to go get them when my friend asked if he could go instead, because he had never really explored the water park like that. His uncle said yes, but then started to say,
"If you see someone, don't run."
My friend thought his uncle was just joking and tried to laugh it off, but his uncle looked serious. That kind of freaked him out, but he brushed it off since they joked around a lot. While he was on his way to the bathroom, he mentioned that it was pretty far, but he kept walking. About halfway there, he suddenly heard a door slam. It was really loud because it was a metal door, and that completely freaked him out. After pausing for a moment, he saw a woman dressed entirely in white. She looked wet, almost transparent. He stood there for a second, terrified, and then started running back toward his uncle. As he ran, he could hear wet footsteps slamming against the pavement, getting faster and faster behind him. He later said he was glad he was active and played soccer because he was able to run really fast. When he finally reached his uncle, he started tearing up and explaining how he saw a woman dressed in white chasing him. That's when his uncle said,
I'm sorry I didn't tell you about this before, but this place is haunted. The woman you saw was a ghost. Her children drowned here, and the pain completely broke her. She ended her life in that bathroom so she could be with them forever.
After hearing that, my friend didn't know what to say or do. He just stood there in silence. Because of that incident, he had to go to therapy, and even now, he's still afraid when he thinks about it. I have written to you before because I am a big fan of the stories that you cover. I shared my story about a weird man that I used to see at my grandmother's house, but back then I didn't share many details because I was scared. But today, I'd like to share the whole story with you. I'm 16 right now, but this story happened when I was about 7. I used to go to my grandmother's house a lot because she had 4 cats, and I loved to play with them. Almost every time I went to her house, there would be an older-looking man with long white hair, glasses, and a brown cane with beautiful designs on it. He needed the cane because he had a limp in his left leg. My grandmother always used to talk with him over a cup of tea, but I was always scared of him. There wasn't anything particularly scary about him, but I disliked him for reasons I couldn't explain. He would never speak to me, he would just look at me in a strange way. After a few years, I stopped seeing him, but it didn't bother me. Only about 2 years ago, I asked my grandmother about him, and she said that she didn't know who I was talking about. I tried explaining to her how the man looked to jog her memory, but she still insisted that she didn't know him. I realized trying to remind her about him was pointless, so I asked my other family members about him, and they also had no idea who I was talking about. Finally, the last person I asked was my younger sister, who was 13 at the time. I asked her if she remembered him, and to my surprise, she actually did. But she remembered him a little differently. She told me she remembered him having a limp in his right leg, and that his cane wasn't made out of wood with designs on it. She said it was metallic, and she told me about one detail that I had tried to forget as a child. The man's eyes were always wide open, and they had a reddish color to them. I still sometimes get nightmares about him, even though I don't even know who he was. This story happened about a year ago, but I still remember all the details. Details I wish I could forget. In the summer, my sisters and I had a habit of going out for late-night walks. Walking at night in our neighborhood felt calming, and we also walked because we couldn't stand the unbearable heat in our apartment since we didn't have an air conditioner. One day, my 2 older sisters decided to walk without me, thinking I wouldn't go. So I decided to go out and search for them so we could all walk together. The neighborhood that night was very calm, almost too calm. There was a cold mist, and the wind whistled softly. When I realized I was a bit too far from my neighborhood, I decided to go home, thinking my sisters had gone back earlier that night. On my way home, however, I noticed a silhouette of a guy running toward me from not too far away. At first, he seemed like he was jogging, but my instincts told me to run as fast as I could. As I started running, the guy was already behind me, moving at a terrifying speed. I started to panic. Fortunately, I was close to my home. I didn't want to go there because that would have been a dangerous move, but I had no choice. The moment I reached the apartment, I felt a sense of relief. The guy, however, was right behind me, exhausted and breathing heavily. I rang my family's apartment bell and pretended to be on the phone. Eventually, I got inside and didn't say a word to my mom or my sisters because I was too scared. Ever since then, the thought of meeting that guy again has never left my mind. I became paranoid, and obviously, I stopped going out at night with my sisters. I was even worried for them, afraid they might encounter the same experience I lived through, but with a worse outcome. This story happened to my uncle when he was 25, and it's still happening to him to this day. He lives at my grandmother's house. At some point, he began to feel that some kind of spiritual presence was following him. Wherever he went, especially when he was alone at home, it always felt like it was there. He didn't think it was an evil spirit, but strange things kept happening around him, almost like something out of a poltergeist story. When he took a shower, he would suddenly hear the toilet flush by itself. Sometimes there were knocking sounds on the mirror, or shampoo would come out on its own. When he was eating, his spoon would slip out of his hand for no reason. Cups filled with water would suddenly fall over. Sometimes, even the taste of his food would completely change. He would make spicy food, but it tasted sweet instead. When he tried to study, loud noises would suddenly blast from his speakers, scaring and distracting him. Even while watching TV, strange things would happen, as if something was deliberately trying to bother him. This happened almost every day, but despite all of that, he never thought he would actually see it. Then, one night, something unexpected happened. Around 2 a.m., my uncle fell asleep. Not long after, he heard strange noises coming from outside his room. Curious, he slowly looked through the slightly open door. That's when he saw it. Standing in the hallway was a figure wearing white clothes with long black hair flowing as if it were being blown by the wind. It looked like a woman. The sight was terrifying. He realized that the figure was staring directly at him. Instead of running away, my uncle stared back without blinking. They looked at each other for several minutes. Then, suddenly, the figure vanished into thin air. To this day, my uncle says he can't forget that moment. He still wonders who or what that spirit was and why it chose to follow him. Hey, for privacy reasons, let's call me Aurora, and this is my story. I was 15 at the time this incident happened. To give you a brief background about myself, I lived with my parents and grandparents and was a high school student at the time. It was a Friday night, and as an enthusiastic adolescent, I begged my mom to let me stay up late since I didn't have school the next day. She agreed and said I could stay up until 2 a.m., no later than that. I was very happy because I had a solo movie night planned. I went to the kitchen, prepared popcorn, reheated some pizza, returned to the living room couch, and put on the latest horror movie at the time. I have always been a horror fan and was never scared of things like that. The movie ended around 1 a.m., and since I still had time before bed, I started watching some YouTube videos. After a while, I heard some rustling sounds coming from the kitchen. Thinking it must be my mom, probably getting water, I didn't think much of it. Before I continue, let me give you a bit of detail about my house. My living room area was right after the main door, and the kitchen was right behind the sofa. It was a closed kitchen with a door-like entrance. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice calling my name. Thinking it was my mom calling for me, I turned around and noticed that the kitchen lights were off, which was odd considering my mom is very scared of darkness and things like that. Before I could think any further, I saw my mom's hand protruding from the entrance of the kitchen, gesturing for me to come to her. It was more like a faint shadow, but I could tell it was my mother because of the rings on her fingers. She loves wearing rings. Without thinking much, I set my laptop aside and stood up to go to her. As I reached the kitchen, I turned on the light, and to my utter shock, I saw the kitchen was empty. There was no one there. Then who gestured for me to come over, and who was calling my name? While I was still in shock, I suddenly heard a loud noise. It was my mom yelling my name from her room. I turned and saw her standing in the bedroom doorway, telling me that it was already 2 a.m. and that I needed to go to bed. Not wanting to scare her, I didn't say anything and went to bed. The next morning, I told her everything, and she was shocked as well. Trying not to scare me further, she brushed the topic off, but I could clearly see the unease on her face. 6 months later, we moved to a new apartment complex. I'm 22 now, and to this day, what happened that night remains a mystery.
My name is Autumn, and I've had a few paranormal experiences in my life. This one happened several years ago when I was living in Longview. At the time, I often went to my boyfriend's grandparents' house with him. It was close to where I lived, and I really liked them. One day, he and I went there with 2 other friends. After we arrived, we all gathered around and downloaded a Ouija board app on my phone. We were really into paranormal stuff, and honestly, we weren't scared at all. We tried it a few times and came into contact with several spirits. 2 of them were far more specific than the others. The first spirit we encountered said her name was Peggy. We asked her simple questions, things like, "How did you die?" and "Are you trapped here?" She claimed she had drowned in a swamp. Coincidentally, there was a filthy, trash-filled swamp directly behind my boyfriend's grandparents' house. One of our friends got scared and begged us to stop, saying she didn't want to hear anymore. We said goodbye to the spirit and tried the app a few more times, but this time, a spirit appeared that refused to give us its name. The friend who had been scared of Peggy started saying she had a really bad feeling about it. We all laughed it off, and just to mess with her, we asked the spirit, "Do you like us?" The planchette moved to no, and at that exact moment, my phone screen began to flicker very faintly. We were all terrified and immediately closed the app. Later that night, everyone went home. I begged my grandmother, who I was living with at the time, to let me stay the night at my boyfriend's grandparents' house. Our families were close, so it wasn't unusual, and she agreed. My boyfriend and I decided to make the night a little more special. So we grabbed some drinks, we watched YouTube, took small sips, and talked. At one point, he got up to use the bathroom. When this happened, I was sitting on the top bunk, curled with my back against the wall. I could hear him coughing in the bathroom right next to his mirror, so I assumed he'd be back at any moment and relaxed a bit. I swear my eyes were closed, yet I could still see the mirror across the room, the dresser, the TV, and the game console. Then someone started talking to me. A cold but gentle hand brushed a strand of hair away from my face, and a voice softly asked, "Are you okay, baby?" Without thinking, I answered, "Yeah, why?" The hand stayed on my cheek, or at least the cold sensation did. Then the voice asked, "Will you carry my baby?" I got scared, but I assumed my boyfriend was just drunk and messing with me. I replied, "Maybe when we're older, but not now, baby." The voice became more insistent. It started to distort, twisting into something deeper and unfamiliar, repeating over and over, "Will you carry my baby?" I kept saying, No, this isn't funny anymore, please stop." Then I heard my boyfriend's voice say, "Who are you talking to?" Everything went completely black. I snapped my eyes open and saw my boyfriend looking at me, his face full of concern. "I was talking to you," I said, assuming he was joking. "I just walked back from the bathroom," he said, even more worried. "I heard you talking to someone." Without hesitation, I jumped off the bunk bed and screamed at him to stop messing with me, that he was scaring me. He grabbed my hand and we ran out of the room into the living room. I couldn't understand what had just happened. I collapsed onto the couch and explained everything, crying because I genuinely felt like my life was in danger. He started tearing up too. As I told him what I had experienced, I realized something. He wasn't lying. Whoever touched me and spoke to me, it wasn't him. Neither of us slept that night. We sat in the living room until around 6 or 7 in the morning, then went into the bedroom, grabbed our things, and left for my house. As soon as I got home, I went straight to my room, curled up, and tried to sleep. Later, when I started looking things up, I came across old myths and legends about demons that drain life from women while they sleep. I hope I never experience anything like that again. It's too difficult to explain to others and even to myself. That night, I felt like I was losing my mind. I wanted to share this story because I used to believe that demons like that only existed in books. I never thought they could be real.
I want to share a story my grandmother used to tell me when I was a kid. She told me a lot of stories growing up, but this one always stuck with me. It was strange, sad, and deeply unsettling in a way I never forgot. When my grandmother was about 10 years old, around 10 years before the partition of India and Pakistan, she was living in Goa, India. Her family was deeply Catholic, and the church was a big part of their daily lives. Every Sunday, after Sunday school ended, my grandmother and her friends would play in the church garden while they waited for their parents to come pick them up. My grandmother's name was Alice, and she had 3 close friends, Ella, Jacqueline, and Marilyn. Ella was different from the others. She was an orphan, and there was always something distant about her, like she was half lost in thought. While the other kids laughed and ran around, Ella would sometimes say she could see people that no one else could see. Some of the kids found that uncomfortable, but my grandmother was always kind to her. One Sunday, while they were playing in the garden, Ella suddenly stopped. She said she could hear someone calling her name. None of the other girls heard anything. Curious, Ella slowly walked toward a large palm tree near the edge of the garden. Sitting on the ground beneath it was a woman. According to Ella, the woman was breathtakingly beautiful. She wore a soft, white dress that looked like silk, glowed almost like an angel, and smelled faintly of jasmine. Ella talked with the woman for a while. When Sunday school ended, one of the nuns from the orphanage came to call Ella back. Before leaving, Ella pulled my grandmother aside and told her about the woman.
Alice, I met a woman today. She's so beautiful and she smells like jasmine. She looks like a bride. And she lives near that tree. We're going to meet here every Sunday, so I won't be playing with you guys anymore.
Then Ella made my grandmother promise not to tell anyone, and because she was a good friend, my grandmother kept that promise. As time passed, Ella changed. She became happier, more outgoing. She got deeply involved in church activities, and there was something about her, almost like she had a glow. Jacqueline and Marilyn, who had always been the most popular and active girls at church, grew jealous of her. They even told my grandmother she should stop being friends with Ella. Instead, my grandmother chose to distance herself from them. When my grandmother eventually told Ella about this, Ella didn't seem surprised at all.
She already told me this would happen.
Ella said. That's when my grandmother finally asked her what she and the woman had been talking about every Sunday all that time. Even now, her answer still gives me chills. Ella said,
Alice, remember how I told you I can see people others can't? She's one of them. She told me I was given a gift by God and that my parents are watching over me from His side. But she also told me something sad, that I won't live very long. That's why I have to enjoy life and why we shouldn't stay too far apart. She told me to forgive Jacqueline and Marilyn. She said resentment only poisons our hearts. And whenever she hugs me, it feels warm, like being held by my mother.
For years, my grandmother listened to Ella talk about the woman and the lessons that she learned from her. She didn't fully believe any of it, not until the war began. Ella passed away. Soon after, my grandmother's family fled and eventually moved to Pakistan. Even decades later, my grandmother never forgot Ella. She never knew whether Ella's experiences were real or just the imagination of a lonely child. But one thing was certain, that mysterious woman changed Ella's life. And even now, I sometimes think about this story and wonder, did Ella really see an angel? This happened when my mom was 7 years old. Back then, my mom and my grandmother often went into the forest to pick mushrooms and wild berries. They did it almost every week, and even now, they still go sometimes. One day, after collecting a lot, they were on their way back home. That's when my grandmother accidentally bumped into a man on the trail. They both apologized and went their separate ways. My mom noticed that the man had a strange, unpleasant smell, but she didn't think much of it. A little while later, the same man appeared again, and this time he was following them. He asked, "Are you here to pick mushrooms?" They both said yes. My grandmother replied,
Yes, but we're heading home now.
Then the man said, "Follow me. I know a place where there are a lot of mushrooms." At that moment, my grandmother felt a chill run down her spine. She told him they needed to go home quickly. My mom was tired too and just wanted to leave. But the man wouldn't stop. He kept insisting that they follow him, again and again. Finally, they started running, and he ran after them. When they were almost out of the forest, the man suddenly stopped. He just stood there, staring at them, with a strange, unreadable expression. They ran all the way home. About 3 days later, my mom and grandmother went back to the forest to pick more mushrooms. This time, they took a different path. As soon as they entered, they saw several police cars. It looked like a crime scene. Later, they found out that it really was one. A police officer approached them and asked if they had seen anything suspicious. My grandmother told him about the man who had followed them. The officer then showed her a photo and asked, "Is this the man? He's our main suspect." My grandmother froze. It was him, the same creepy man who had chased them. She was absolutely sure. She asked the officer,
What happened? What did he do?
The officer told her that a young woman had been brutally murdered in the forest. My grandmother was terrified. My mom started crying uncontrollably. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at their house. Because they were witnesses, my grandmother was summoned to court. She testified about what she had seen. In the end, the man was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. About a week later, news came out that he had confessed. He admitted that he had killed 2 other women. The girl in the forest wasn't his only victim. After that, my mom and grandmother felt relieved. They slowly began going back to the forest again. But 4 years later, something else happened. There was a prison break in the area. Rumors spread that about 7 inmates had escaped, including him. After hearing that, they were too scared to ever return. They never went back to that forest again. Sometimes I still think about what could have happened to them. What if they had followed him to get more mushrooms?